Something remarkable was hiding in plain sight when a collector reached for his 2002 penny and noticed Lincoln's profile splitting in half like a magic trick gone wrong. That unexpected stray in his change jar didn't promise a fortune at first glance, just a humble copper disc bearing the familiar visage of our 16th president. Yet when he held it under a magnifier, what should have been a crisp, single-image portrait fractured into two distinct layers, as if history itself had stamped a secret code. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on these underrated treasures and revealing why a few stray cents from 2002 are sending experienced collectors into a frenzy. Before we dive into the quirks and values, let me take you down memory lane. In 2002, the U.S. Mint was still perfecting the post-1982 copper-plated zinc planchet introduced a generation earlier. Lincoln's bicentennial presence on our 1-cent pieces had become so routine that spotting anything unusual felt like discovering a lost chapter in a familiar book. That year's pennies carried the shield reverse for the first time, marking a modern icon for unity. Each struck disc was meant to bear flawless imagery on both sides, but as minting speed increased to meet global demand, the process occasionally threw a curveball. Blank sometimes misaligned, color seams shifted, and pressure variations caused the die's deepest grooves to register twice, giving birth to the split or double die varieties we'll explore. These anomalies weren't intentional, they slipped through quality control before someone realized what landed in their pocket. The hallmark of a rare 2002 double-die penny lies in that unmistakable, off-center mirror of Lincoln's bust. Tilted under bright light and you'll see two chins, two coats of hair, and two edges of his profile, each layer slightly askew. The gap between those images measures anywhere from half a millimeter to over a millimeter, depending on how much metal shifted during striking. Next to the obverse oddity, some specimens exhibit doubling around the date and mint mark, but it's the portrait that steals the show. These features set them apart from the common, zinc Canadian loonies, and ordinary cast-off cents we drop into tip jars. Finding crisp doubling at the mold center, rather than just along the rim, confirms a serious variety that seasoned numismatists hunt down at shows and online auctions. So, what does that rarity translate to in cold, hard cash? At recent auctions, select specimens in heavily circulated grades, where Lincoln's face shows minor wear but the doubling remains distinct, are fetching between $150 and $300. As grade improves, prices leap dramatically. Mint state examples graded MS65 by PCGS or NGC can command $800 to $1,200, while flawless MS67 pieces have topped $2,500 when a major collector competes. The auction record for a deeply split MS67 2002 D penny sits around $3,300, sold in early 2024 to a bidder who prized the clarity of the doubled bust and the pristine copper sheen. These figures underscore how condition and eye appeal influence a coin's perceived worth. The more your specimen glitters under a loupe, the more bidders will push the price skyward. Beyond their monetary value, these 2002 doubles carry stories that add color to any display cabinet. One collector found his error under a restaurant table and swapped it for everyday change, unaware of its potential until a YouTube video later identified it as a prized variety. Another discovered 4 of them in a single roll purchased from a bank, a remarkable 1 in 30 million strike rate that still boggles the mind. The most intriguing tale involves a Pennsylvania railroad engineer who, in 2002, used one of these pennies to test the lubrication on a model locomotive's axles, and inadvertently preserved a near-perfect example sealed under layers of oil and grime until its unearthing 2 decades later. Value can swing wildly based on condition. In well-worn, circulated grades where the doubling shows but the fields are scuffed, you might slip these into your collection for as little as $80 to $120, banking on a later upgrade if you find a sharper strike. Mid-grade pieces, $50 to $58 Australian dollars, with strong detail and only light evidence of handling sell for $300 to $500, striking a balance between affordability and visual pop. Mint state examples, MS60 and above, shift into premium territory, and prices climb steeply per grade level. From one decade to the next, the Lincoln cent has a way of staying just familiar enough to escape notice, until you dig deeper. The 1987 penny is a perfect example. At a glance, it looks like every other cent of the era. But this is where things get interesting. 1987 marked the tail end of a period where both design flaws and production quirks slipped through at rates that would raise eyebrows today. For collectors in the know, this year has become something of a magnet for obscure errors and oddities. And for owners of circulated change or full penny rolls from the late 80s, this is one coin worth a second look. The 1987 Lincoln cent was struck at 3 U.S. mints: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver, D, and San Francisco, S, with the S mint coin struck only in proof format for collectors. The regular strike pennies from Philly and Denver were business strikes, meaning they were intended for circulation, and it's within those, particularly the Denver output, that we find most of the valuable varieties. One of the most talked about versions of the 1987 penny is the double-deer variety from Denver. Known formally as the 1987 DDDOFS 101, this coin displays a clear doubling on Lincoln's earlobe, an instantly visible marker for those familiar with doubled dies. The doubling is strong enough that it doesn't take magnification to notice, although a loop helps reveal the full extent of the shift. This variety is believed to have originated from a hubbing error where the die received a misaligned second strike, a common issue in the 80s before digital die production. When this variety hit the mainstream coin community, it didn't take long for collectors to start combing through their old stashes. In mint state condition, particularly MS-65 red and above, these coins began appearing at auction and quickly broke triple digits. As of now, a certified MS-66RD, red designation, 1987 D double-deer cent fetches around $150 to $250. Higher grades like MS-67RD can cross the $400 mark, with the finest examples inching closer to $1,000 due to scarcity and demand. Another notable error from the 1987 cent series is the off-metal strike. A handful of 1987 pennies were accidentally struck on dime planchets. These are smaller, silver-colored blanks typically used for 10-cent pieces. When this happens, you get a Lincoln cent with most of the design cut off, squeezed onto a dime-sized flan. The results are dramatic and unmistakable. These error coins weigh only about 2.27 grams instead of the expected 2.5, and they lack a copper coating. A circulated example can sell for $150 to $300 depending on how much detail remains visible. Uncirculated versions can exceed $500 easily, and if the coin has full date and mint mark, it becomes even more desirable. A standout example came from an estate sale in Kansas, where an old Whitman album contained a 1987 penny struck on a dime planchet, complete with full Liberty and In God We Trust, but only partial Lincoln bust detail. That coin, certified as -58 Australian dollars by PCGS, sold for $385 in a regional auction, well above typical expectations. These kinds of discoveries often come from casual collectors or inherited collections, which makes them even more intriguing. Another variety that pops up occasionally is the 1987 P or 1987 D penny struck with broadstrike errors. These occur when the retaining collar that keeps the planchet in place during striking fails, allowing the metal to expand more than usual. The result is a noticeably wider, thinner penny with soft edges and often distorted rims. While less valuable than off-metal errors, broadstrike still just as Lincoln's doubled bust unveiled hidden drama in those 2002 cents, the 1983 penny harbors its own mysteries that are easy to overlook. Hold one upside down beneath your loop, and you might spot a copper core peeking through the zinc plating, or discover that a mint-made scratch oddly spells out S on the reverse. Behind its common appearance lies a tale of metallurgical growing pains, and a handful of misstrikes that have seasoned collectors and bankroll guardians whispering excitedly at coin shows. Back in the early 1980s, soaring copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to shift from solid bronze planchets to a lightweight sandwich, a thin shell of copper-plated zinc around a core that was 97.5% zinc. Production ramped up dramatically by 1983, with billions of pieces needed for vending machines, payphones, and parking meters nationwide. Quality control procedures were still settling into this new process when the Mint introduced the Lincoln Cents reverse design change, swapping the wheat ears for a trio of interlocking wheat stalks around the denomination. That fusion of a fresh reverse and untested blanks proved to be a recipe for error, and a surprising number of 1983 cents left the press with flaws that only the keenest eye, or an informed collector, could appreciate. The most coveted variety from that year is the so-called 1983 double die obverse, a misregistration that produces a faint echo of Lincoln's hair ribbon, cheekbone, and the beginning strokes of Liberty. Unlike the dramatic doubling seen on earlier classic errors, this one is subtle, sometimes only a millimeter-wide ghost image that demands patience and the right lighting to confirm. There are also thin planchet issues, where insufficient copper cladding results in large patches of silvery zinc showing through the outer shell. And then you have the stunner, a rare off-center strike combined with a clipped planchet, giving one side of the coin a ghostly crescent edge and a tilted reverse scene that looks almost surreal. These features drive rarity and thrill. Collectors prize the double die pieces because the Mint never officially recognized the variety, so no registry sets, and only a handful ever appear at auction each year. When they do, values depend heavily on clarity. A faint example graded AU details might fetch $75 to $120, while a crisp MS-65 could soar to $600 or more when bidders spot that symmetrical doubling along Lincoln's jawline. Auction records for top specimens run north of $900 when someone uncovers a fully mirrored ear, jaw, and date that practically jumps off the surface. Broken planchet and thin-clad pennies appeal to a different crowd, often those who love the chemistry of minting errors. A standard thin planchet piece in circulated condition might trade for around $20 to $30, but flawless mint state examples, where the copper layer peels back evenly, leaving a glimmer of zinc beneath, can climb into the low hundreds. For off-center strikes, the premium depends on how much of the design is missing. Pieces clipped at the rim by 5% command $50 to $80, while dramatic 25 to 30% clips like a coin half moon can command $200 to $350 in higher grades. Beyond numbers, stories add that sparkle you don't see on grading slabs. One dealer stumbled onto a roll of 1983 cents that were still magnetically attractive, proof the copper plating was so thin that magnets clung to the zinc core. Another collector amassed over 30 thin-clad varieties by simply sorting change at the checkout counter. A particularly memorable find came when a coin-op mechanic discovered a 1983 off-center penny embedded so deep in a parking meter mechanism that it had to be pried out with pliers, its rim sliced and bent but doubling perfectly preserved. Condition plays the starring role in value swings. Heavy wear can obscure subtle doubling entirely, knocking a potential $600 coin down to a $20 curiosity. Mid-grades with gentle circulation but sharp doubling land in a sweet spot of $150 to $250, providing both aesthetic appeal and investment potential. Mint state really separates the hobbyists from the speculators. MS-64 pieces might hover around $400, while a true blue ribbon MS-67 example, if someone ever submits one, could rewrite auction records and fetch the sort of five-figure sum usually reserved for 18th-century rarities. Every time you sift through a jar of Lincoln cents, remember that 1983 isn't just the year of the zinc penny. It's a snapshot of a mint in transition, grappling with new materials and unearthing hidden gems that waited decades for someone to appreciate their quiet elegance. As those bright copper shells spin in, if the 1987 penny represents the quiet charm of the late copper-plated zinc era, the 2010 penny comes in like a reboot, bold, rebranded, and modern. 2010 wasn't just another year in the Lincoln cent lineup. It was the first year of the shield reverse design, replacing the Lincoln Memorial after more than 50 years. That design shift alone makes 2010 a landmark year. But what really gets collectors buzzing isn't just the updated look, it's the varieties and errors that slipped into circulation early on, right as the U.S. Mint was adjusting to the new tooling and die combinations. Some of the most surprising 2010 cents have come from standard rolls, pocket change, or overlooked coin jars, hiding in plain sight for years before collectors caught on. Let's start with the basics. The 2010 penny features the familiar bust of Lincoln on the obverse, still based on Victor D. Brenner's 1909 design, but the reverse now shows a Union shield with 13 vertical stripes and a single horizontal bar across the top. It's meant to symbolize national unity, a nod to Lincoln's preservation of the Union. The design was sculpted by artist Lyndall Bass and engraved by Joseph Mena. While it may not look radical at first glance, this change was huge. Any time the mint rolls out a new design, especially on a coin as widely circulated as the penny, it opens the door for transitional errors, early die state flaws, and collector intrigue. The most talked about variety from 2010 is the so-called wide AM reverse. Now, this one's a bit of a twist because it's technically not supposed to exist. Starting in 1993, the standard design for the penny placed the letters A and M in America very close together. But a few coins struck in later years were mistakenly made with a reverse design intended for proof coins, where the A and M are spaced farther apart. That error was famously found in multiple years between 1998 and 2000. While 2010 wasn't officially part of the wide AM era, a handful of collectors began reporting reverse dies with wider spacing, particularly from the Philadelphia Mint. Whether these were leftover dies or transitional errors isn't fully confirmed, but authenticated examples now carry strong premiums. A certified 2010 wide AM in MS66RD can sell for $150 to $300, and some pristine MS67s have fetched over $500 in recent online sales. Even more unusual are 2010 cents struck on foreign planchets or transitional stock. A few confirmed examples were minted on planchets intended for other countries, such as copper-plated steel blanks or thinner stock used for Canadian cents. These coins usually weigh under 2.5 grams and often have a slightly different hue. They're tough to identify without a scale or metal analyzer, but when certified, they're hot commodities. A 2010 penny on a foreign planchet recently sold at auction for $1,025 in AU condition, largely because of how rare and unexplained these strikes are. And then we come to the missing FG variety, named after the absence of designer Frank Gasparo's initials, which should appear on the right side of the shield's base. On a small number of 2010 shield cents, this FG is completely missing, not due to wear, but due to grease-filled dies or die polishing that wiped out the detail. These coins gained traction after being found in sealed bank rolls in 2012 and 2013. While not a double die in the traditional sense, they represent a legitimate and consistent mint error. In grades MS65 and higher, the missing FG from one decade to the next, the Lincoln cent has a way of staying just familiar enough to escape notice, until you dig deeper. The 1987 penny is a perfect example. At a glance, it looks like every other cent of the era. But this is where things get interesting. 1987 marked the tail end of a period where both design flaws and production quirks slipped through at rates that would raise eyebrows today. For collectors in the know, this year has become something of a magnet for obscure errors and oddities. And for owners of circulated change or full penny rolls from the late 80s, this is one coin worth a second look. The 1987 Lincoln cent was struck at 3 U.S. mints, Philadelphia, no mint mark, Denver, D, and San Francisco, S, with the S mint coin struck only in proof format for collectors. Penny struck with broadstrike errors. These occur when the retaining collar that keeps the planchet in place during striking fails, allowing the metal to expand more than usual. The result is a noticeably wider, thinner penny with soft edges and often distorted rims. While less valuable than off-metal errors, broadstrike still attracts strong interest, especially if the coin is in high grade. Typical value, $25 to $75, but exceptional examples can go higher if the coin also has strong luster and no post-mint damage. Condition plays a huge role in determining value here. Most 1987 pennies from circulation, even if they've avoided heavy wear, don't climb past the $1 mark unless they show errors. But in uncirculated condition, especially with full red color and clean surfaces, prices jump quickly. A regular MS 65RD 1987 D cent sells for $5 to $10. Push that to MS 67RD, and it might bring $50 or more depending on the market at the time. These jumps in price are driven by population reports from grading companies. If only a dozen examples exist in a particular grade, competition among registry set builders can heat up fast. It's also worth mentioning the proof-only 1987 S cent struck at the San Francisco Mint and sold directly to collectors as part of annual proof sets. These coins are mirror-like and highly detailed. Most 1987 S proofs are plentiful and worth about $2 to $5 in original condition. However, cameo and deep cameo versions, where Lincoln's portrait is heavily frosted and contrasts sharply against the shiny fields, carry a bit of a premium. PR 69 DCAM specimens are common, but perfect PR 70 DCAM examples have sold for $50 to $75, simply due to the difficulty of achieving flawless perfection. Now, a quick collector's tale worth sharing. A man in Indiana, retired military and longtime coin hobbyist, bought 5 rolls of 1987 D pennies back in 1988 and stored them untouched in his gun safe. Decades later, curious about what he had, he opened them up, and in the third roll found a double deer variety in blazing mint red. After sending it in for grading, it came back MS 66RD and sold to a prominent Lincoln cent specialist for $375. Not a life-changing payday, but a thrilling reward for a bit of patience and curiosity. When hunting through 1987 cents, your best tools are patience, a bright light, and a solid 10 times loop. Focus on Lincoln's ear, his throat, the Liberty inscription, and the date. Also pay attention to weight. Off-metal strikes will feel slightly lighter, and color. Copper-plated zinc cents from 1982 onward tend to corrode in odd ways, so pristine red surfaces are harder to find. If a coin is bright, unblemished, and error-free, it could still carry a premium just for its grade. And if you've got 1987 pennies stashed in coffee cans, desk drawers, or sealed tubes, now's the time to break them out and give them a second look. You might find something common, but you might also uncover a piece of U.S. minting history that turns out to be a low-key gem in the modern market.